Okay, everyone. Hello. Let me just go ahead and share my screen so you can see what I'm going to be presenting. There we go. Right. Okay. Oh, that's not going to work. Let's try that one. There we go. Okay. Hello, everyone. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Obviously, it's a real shame that we can't all be together for the event as we would be normally, but I'm really glad to be able to present to all of you who are here and talk a little bit more about online learning and a whole range of other things in terms of the brief of this session. So I know obviously that's something which all of us have been getting used to in terms of moving towards the online world a lot more than we would have been expecting to. And obviously that has some challenges. Obviously it has some benefits as well. So let's to get started, let me just give a little bit of an introduction to who I am and who I work for as a company. So my name is Peter Russell and I'm Operations Director for a company called Russell Partnership Technology. Now in terms of Russell Partnership Collection, we are a collection of 3 companies, which you'll see on the screen at the moment. We do consulting and that ranges from delivering food and beverage consultancy to technology consultancy, nutrition and a whole range of other things in between, all across tourism, hospitality, education and the industry as well. So our big project at the moment is that we are delivering the food strategy for Expo 2020 in Dubai, which will now be Expo 2021 in Dubai. Second part of the business is our technology part of the business that I head up. With this part of the business, we specialize in learning technologies, software systems, and anything around teaching, learning, and development for hotels, hospitality, tourism, food and beverage, events. So the whole sort of sector there in terms of all the things that we do. We then have our foundation, which is our philanthropic heart of the business. And that's where we do give back both to the industry and to education. And we have a program supporting developing nations with educational programs. So let's get into the detail of what I want to talk to you all about today. So obviously we're talking here about online education and I wanted to talk to you broadly in terms of how this is affecting our sector. And then I'm going to detail in on the sort of things that people like ourselves do, but this is not specifically just me here to tell you about the programs that we deliver. This is about a whole range of online packages, online support, online systems that can help. But I think just to get that helicopter view to start with in terms of what's actually happening in terms of our industry, in terms of tourism, hospitality educators, and overall the whole sector of online learning. So COVID has had, as this graph on the screen shows you, has had a staggering impact on global education. So number of learners who've been impacted by school closures. So this data is obviously still being collected and this goes all the way up until the peak of the pandemic, which was early April. So you can see that back in February, which was sort of a base level, obviously there was some impact there on China at that point. But at that point, there were around 0.3 billion learners who were sort of impacted at that point. And then at the peak, that went up to 1.38 billion. So it's a huge number of people who've been impacted. So we're all in this together is kind of what this is saying. Now, a few further things, and I find some of these things incredibly interesting, and obviously they're very impactful for all the things that we're doing. So I know this isn't all about money, because that's obviously not the most important thing. I know all of us are in the sector here because we have a passion for imparting education, but of course it's important for things to work from a business perspective as well. So the worldwide e-learning market is projected by 2025 by Forbes to be worth 325 billion. So we're seeing steep increases in that. So I think the other thing that we can recognize from the current situation is that obviously a lot of what we're doing by moving our teaching online is in reaction to the fact that we have to, but there is also a growing demand for people who want to be learning online as well. And obviously, as we come out of this, and we don't know what that's going to look like yet, some of this is going to stay the same, some of this will be different. But what we do know is that the demand for e-learning is definitely going nowhere. So it's certainly not a fly-by-night thing. We definitely need to be aware of this moving forwards and dealing with it, because that's what our students are going to be wanting in some form. And I'll talk in a bit more detail later on about the different formats that can take in terms of fully online and hybrid models, etc., which I know we're all deep within at the moment. Second thought here is that e-learning actually increases learning retention rates by sometimes quite a huge amount. So e-learning can increase that learning retention rate by up to 60%. A lot of this is because when students are learning online, they get to learn at their own pace. When they don't understand something, they can go back and they can go through it again. And the students feel very well supported by this online learning. Now, of course, that's no guarantee. A lot of this depends on the subject matter, how the material is put together, how it is presented, and a whole range of other things. But that's a real positive. So I think, again, we don't want to look strictly at negatives and saying, oh, well, we can't teach face-to-face, we have to be online, it's not as good as it should be. Obviously, there are positives and negatives both ways, but I think a lot of what this tells us is that there is a huge benefit to blended learning in terms of having that ability to be both face-to-face and in an online environment. Final thing here, and I know this final statistic here does relate to the US, but I think it's definitely something which is pretty universal. This tells us that 81% of US college students agreed that digital learning technology was helping them to improve their grades. So again, that links in with my previous point around that fact that obviously we are deeper into online learning at the moment than potentially we would like to be, especially given the fact that this is something which was had our hand forced here rather than necessarily deciding it. But moving forwards, there's definitely going to be benefits to continuing with parts, at least, of the things that we're doing online. So a little bit more research around online learning and how this all works. So as I just said, research shows that students retain 25 to 60% more material when learning is online. Now, as the comparison to that stat on the previous slide, that retention rate is around 8 to 10% in the classroom. So there is quite a marked difference there. So even at the low end of that 25% with material being online, that's still significantly higher than the 8 to 10% that we would historically expect within the classroom. So obviously we're all developing our curriculums, we're all continuing to evolve and develop all the time. So I think the key thing is that at the moment, for at least, COVID is here to stay and online learning certainly is. So let's look at the reasons why that is. So as I mentioned, with that sort of that improvement. So this is mostly due to the fact that students being able to learn online, e-learning requires 40 to 60% less time to learn than a traditional classroom. And please don't think with all of this that I'm sort of sat here saying online learning is the best, online learning is amazing, we should all be moving to teach fully online and that classroom-based learning is historical. I'm definitely not saying that. I think the key thing from the research that we've done here is that the blended approach is going to be the most powerful approach, because if we go fully into one or fully into the other, there's always going to be things that we lose. But where we can have a foot in both camps, then we can pick up on all of these benefits. And I think this has been shown in the same in terms of, I was reading some great research the other day about this within industry as well. Obviously, a lot of industry, people within business are working more from home right now. A lot of people are very much enjoying that. A lot of people are very much not enjoying it. And there's been a few studies that say that actually the sweet spot for this is to work from home between 1 and 2 days a week and then spend the rest of the time in work. Now, of course, I don't think any research has been completed yet, not that I've seen anyway, in terms of how this relates to students, but I would imagine that the same is very much true with students, that working fully within one environment is not the best, whereas that sweet spot is going to be a good balance between the two. But this does hold firm that e-learning requiring less time than traditional classroom settings. And again, it's those same points I mentioned on the previous slide. So that's because students learn at their own pace. They can go back, they can skip over things if they know them already, and they can accelerate through the parts that they already know. So they feel very much like this is tailored around them and it meets them where they want to be. So that's obviously a really valid and good point there. So I wanted to look at some research from Yuval Noah Harari, yes, if I can pronounce the name right. So he wrote a book which was 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, and he outlined that schools, how they continue to focus on traditional academics, if they continue to focus on traditional academic skills and sort of traditional learning methods, rather than on bringing in things around critical thinking and how we can adapt, which will be more important in the future, that then we're going to run into issues. So there's an examination here on, and again, this is not me sat here saying that I think traditional learning methods are outdated or things like that, but obviously there is a great deal of research here around what people need to develop. And we all know, teaching within tourism and hospitality, that a lot of what we teach is very practically based and obviously is very industry focused. So the move to online could well be the catalyst to create more effective methods for educating students. But again, obviously this all has to be done in the right way. And our belief here is definitely that this needs to be that blended approach between the two things. So I wanted to move on and talk a little about something called COIL or COIL, and this is called Collaborative Online International Learning. Now, unfortunately, I can't take credit for the small case study that I want to share to you, which is a really good way of explaining how this works. This actually comes from someone who I've done quite a great deal of work with. So this project was actually delivered by Professor Nicholas Thomas and a whole range of other people. He's based at DePaul University over in Chicago in the United States. And I know that this has been delivered by quite a number of other people as well. So this is all about looking at how we can get students to interact more with international learning. And of course, there are lots of benefits to this too. Now, one of the other things that I wanted to talk to you about today was things like internships, and obviously there's a lot of great things that we would normally be doing with our students, which we're not able to do in the same way as we would right now. Getting involved with things like COIL-based learning is a really good way of bridging that gap between what we would normally do and what we can do right now, because a lot of this, obviously the name suggests here, this is online learning. So let me just talk you through, and apologies that there's quite a few words on the screen, but I'm going to talk you through the project here and what was delivered. And there's obviously a great deal of scope here, and obviously being part of the ICE and a great network like this means that we're all connected. So all the schools who are part of the network within the ICE, there's great opportunities here to connect. And that's exactly what's happened here with this project. So this was a bringing together of students from China and from the United States. So the students in China were from Jinan, and the United States, they were from Chicago, from DePaul. So what they did was they developed this online series of COIL modules, and that was developed into their undergraduate level hospitality and tourism course. So as you'll see, they had quite a large number of students who were involved with this. It was more than 200 students. And they did this over 4 and 5 week periods. And this was a combination of synchronous and asynchronous learning experiences. Sure, we're all fully aware of the differences there, but synchronous is when we have all of our people together and we're going through things at the same time. And then there's asynchronous elements are when people are going away and doing things in their own time. And that ranged from a whole range of other things, which I'll come to a bit later on in terms of what those things included. So there's obviously different perspectives of this and different goals as well for the students as well. So from the perspective of the Chinese students with this project, the goal of the experience for this COIL project was 2 things. The first thing was increase general knowledge of the rapidly evolving global hospitality and tourism industry, and to enhance their soft skills among future hospitality and tourism industry workers. So again, by that interaction with people from other cultures and other places, there's a lot of learning that can take place. So I think, as we all know, again, obviously this is all based on this case study, the Chinese hospitality in particular is experiencing a real remarkable growth, and that is mirrored in lots of other countries as well, but there is a huge growth over in China when compared with other global counterparts. And that underscores, in terms of that market, it underscores the need for well-qualified students who are ready to have immediate impacts and step into the industry in terms of all those jobs and roles and things that are going to happen. And again, we certainly believe that as we move out of the pandemic, that's certainly going to continue. So enhancing this knowledge is obviously key, and this COIL project was one of the real ways that they wanted to get involved to do that, to have an international perspective. And I think we all understand how important it is to have that international perspective when we're talking about the hospitality industry, based on the fact that it's all about travel and moving around and going to different places. So internationalization in that regard is really important. Now, in terms of that COIL project, this was completed using a whole range of different methodologies. As I mentioned, there was a utilization here on lots of different asynchronous methodologies. So the students going away and learning in the ways they would normally do. And then those synchronous ways where all the students were brought together across China and the US, those two places, in terms of discussions and bringing things together and making sure that was really interactive. So I think there's lots to be said for looking for these innovative ways. And there's obviously a great deal of work that has to go into creating and managing things like this. But the benefits are there, and the benefits are huge. And as we saw from those statistics at the start, the takeaways for the students is really huge in terms of how that all works. Now, I wanted to now go into and talk a little bit about internships, and obviously that links on from what we just talked about there. And a lot of students would normally go off and do an internships, and it was very interesting yesterday. I'm sure many of you were part of the ICE session yesterday, and it was very interesting to hear that perspective from NKUHT around the way they deliver their internships as part of the sandwich approach. And potentially some of the changes that they're thinking of making there in terms of potentially pushing the internship to a different year a little later in the program. But I think we're all aware that internships are a very powerful element, and that's something we want to continue. Now, at the moment, we know it's going to be very difficult for students to go and do a traditional internship right now. So my understanding of what was being spoken about yesterday from NKUHT was the viewpoint there of pushing the internship back within the course is certainly a good idea anyway, but my understanding of that was that the reasoning is to give more time for the industry to recover before those students will go on and go into those internships, which is a very sensible thing to do. So I think where there's the ability to do that, that's certainly a good thing, because unfortunately, there's no real replacement for actually stepping into the real world and going and working in an events role, in a bar, a restaurant, a hotel, in all those different roles. But what can we do in the interim? So that's not necessarily going to be an option for all universities and colleges. It may be that we don't have that option of pushing the internship back, and also we may have students right now that we want to give that experience as much as possible. Now, this is where people like ourselves can come in, and I'm just going to talk you through a little bit about how we've worked with a few partners to deliver simulation-based internship projects and programs. Now, I don't have any slides on this because this is incredibly new, because it's happening right now, and I felt like the more powerful thing would be to talk you through how it all works. So, as we said, normally we would want our students to be going off and doing a live internship, which would cover a whole range of roles. Where students can't go out, we have to bring that into the online world. So where students can't be going out into a hotel, for instance, we have to be doing that online. Now, of course, when we do that, it's going to be very different. That's the key thing to start with. It's not going to be the same, but there's still a huge amount that we can do. Now, of course, this will vary course by course, whether students have done things like this prior to this within their learning, but there's also a whole range of further work we can get them to do. So I'm going to talk about two different partners that we've worked with on this. And these are programs which are up and running now and fully integrated as part of these internships. With the first one, what we have delivered is, and this is part of a wider approach that we've done within one of our hotels, well, within two of our hotel simulation programs, we've created a full module related to COVID. So what this does is it allows students to step into the position of managing hotels and actually practice how it is to manage a hotel within COVID times. Now, of course, I think this is very good and very interesting because what it's doing is allowing students to step into the industry role. So even if they've done a simulation before, they won't have done it in relation to COVID. And it means that then students have to think very carefully around how they will tackle these issues, and it will allow them to gain greater insights into what the industry is facing and how difficult it is for hotels in the current marketplace to pick up business, how to manage their businesses, and how to do all these other things. Alongside that, we will ask the students to do a whole range of other things that we wouldn't normally get them to do within the simulation necessarily. They will be having to do things far more like they would in the industry. So we would be asking the students to complete a full financial forecast for their hotels. So normally students would complete some forecasting, but this would be a much deeper level of forecasting. We would then be presenting students with lots of other scenarios and exercises throughout the program. So these can range from writing their own menu, including things around nutrition. This can involve sales strategies, producing a sales pitch, presenting things to their owner, and doing a whole range of other reporting as well. Now, some of our partners will do those things anyway as part of courses. So if any of you listening already do some of those things as part of simulation-based learning, then of course that's what we like to do. But what we've done is heighten all of those things as part of this internship approach to really push students and try and get as close as physically possible to what it is like out there in the industry. The second approach is somewhat similar in that we've deployed an approach where we put a simulation into an internship program. But then what we've done is we've actually brought in two other elements that we offer as well. We have our hospitality business acumen program, which is a 4-module or a 4-week program around learning all of the core aspects around business acumen for the hotel and the hospitality industry. And that culminates with an exam. So we wove that, we've wove that into that program in terms of adding a further element, because I think the key thing here is about making sure this is very challenging for students. Internships would normally be very challenging. So, and that's not to say that simulation-based things are not normally challenging. They are, but this is again taking that to another level. The further thing that we've worked in, and this is something we've added very recently. So we've just started working with a property management system company. PMS or property management system companies provide front office systems for hotels, as I'm sure all of you are aware. And if we had students going out into the industry, likely one of the things that they would do would be that they would step into the position of being on the front desk or having at least some role within the front office. So the reason why we partner with this company, and this is something we've done during COVID times because we've heard so much demand for this, is that students can then have the ability to actually operate and practice what it's like working within a front office with a real life front office system. And again, this can be matched alongside with the simulation, or this can be done entirely separately. So what this can provide is a full workbook scenario of the sorts of things students would need to be doing if they were working within this environment. So this can range from entering a manual booking into the PMS to conducting a check-in. So we can imagine then that someone's come into the front desk and we have to check them in. We can then complete a whole range of other things in terms of, some of the things sound quite simple, but just students practicing these things over and over mean that when students have the ability to step into these roles, they're going to understand how these things work. So managing, you know, guest preferences, managing entering credit card details, managing group bookings, managing anything like that in terms of the normal guest experience all the way through to check-in. So that full guest experience from a front office perspective, that can all be managed within the system. And as I say, it's a real world system. That it's not, it's simulated in some regard because obviously there isn't a real guest in front of them, but everything else they're doing is completely real. So again, we've developed that in terms of our internship model, and that's proving very popular in terms of any schools who would normally be sending students out for especially front office based roles. But again, I think as we all know, the hospitality industry is so rich and diverse that it's useful to have that perspective across the whole business, even if students are not necessarily going to end up within that role. There's also a whole reporting angle within that program, and a whole range of other things. As a secondary part to that, which could either be done, you know, as alongside with the front office part or in isolation, is the events management side of things. I come from an events background myself, and one of the most useful things to learn is how to create things like banquet event orders, and how to plan events and things like that. So again, within the same system, we can give students virtual tasks and challenges to plan, you know, a boardroom event, to plan a larger meeting, to plan a conference, to plan a wedding, to plan a celebration dinner. And then they need to go into the system, and they need to plan all the things and put all the things in place that they would need to do should they be in a real life environment. So they can put together those real life banquet event orders, and that will include everything. So from including the AV requirements to, you know, writing and deciding on the different menus, and then pushing things all the way they need to go, to then, you know, working in the room block, and how that all works. So there's obviously a big amount of work to be done on that, and bringing in these real life systems is a really, really powerful way of doing that. So as I mentioned, this is not a sales pitch. You know, all the stuff we've done in terms of helping our current partners to do more for their internships is all about giving back. And, you know, we would much rather that students were able to go off into the industry and do these things rather than to be in an online environment, and doing these things more virtually. But that's where we are. So the best we can do is to make sure that we are able to offer as close as is possible with these internships. To talk about some other learning methodologies. Now I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with some of these things. Some of them may be new. And again, I have no vested interest in these 4 particular things, but one of the things that we wrote into the brief for today in terms of what we wanted to present was a bit of an overview of some of the other things that you can bring into the classroom to boost that engagement. And I think this is a good time to talk about what I mentioned earlier about that mix between being fully face-to-face, being fully online, and being hybrid. Now, obviously, I don't think I need to talk about being fully face-to-face. I think all of us are familiar with that. That's largely what we were all doing up until 8-9 months ago, depending, maybe a bit longer, depending on where we're all based. And some, obviously, I think most of us had some experience of teaching online before, but of course it was probably a lot less than we've been doing over recent months. I think the real challenge here, from the research we've done and from the conversations we've had with our partners, is that actually teaching online as we know it, we were very prepared for. Teaching face-to-face we know about because that's what we were doing. Obviously, where we move fully online, there are lots of challenges, but obviously, once we address those, then we're in a good place to deal with them. I think the most challenging, don't want to put too big a target on it, but teaching hybrid is going to be the more difficult. And having spoken with some partners here in the UK, I know that is either being done or was being done, and is still being explored as to how that worked. And the difficulty there revolves around having groups of students in 2 different places. So some of those students being online, some of them being in front of you. It's very hard then to address both of them at the same time. Where we do need to do that, and where we are online, it's really good to bring in some of these online technologies in order to do a number of things. This is all about making sure that things are as interactive as possible. This is about engaging students. This is also about keeping that retention and ensuring that students are understanding the things that we're talking through as well. So let me talk a little bit about the four of these. The first one is a program called Socrative or Socrative, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Now, this is all about creating a two-way exchange with an app. So this is making sure that when you are giving your lecture or seminar, or how that's done, that you can bring in lots of other things in order to make this interactive and two-way. I don't have any statistics on this, but I think one of the big things that we've found, and this is both within education and industry, is that when we're delivering online, it's even more important to engage our learners in a two-way conversation. If we simply talk in the same way as we would have done in a face-to-face environment, it's very easy to lose people very quickly. And it's not because the content is engaging, it's not because the content isn't good, just the nature of the delivery mechanism. So we need to be bringing in things here around these quizzes, these activities, making sure that we've heard from our learners as we're talking. So one system that does that really well is a system called Kahoot. So that is about making lectures interactive. This works with when you have people in front of you, or online, or a combination of the two. They're still within that same environment. And of course, it's very, very good here in terms of engaging people around how that works, because that's one of the key things that we need to do. I will share these afterwards as well. The next thing to mention is a system called Mentimeter. So Mentimeter is all about, again, engagement and about, giving people quizzes. And some of these places like Kahoot and Mentimeter have a lot of these things already prepared as well. So there's already things that you can go through in order to sort of increase that engagement. The final system was called Panopto, and that's all about recording and sharing video. So nothing to show you on that one, but obviously the more and more content that we're creating, the more we need to be able to share that. And I know a lot of you will have LMS and learning management systems that you need to utilize. But a lot of these systems plug in very well with those systems, because there's obviously a clear recognition there that these systems don't simply solve a problem. I think that's the other thing to say with all of the things that I'm talking to you here about in terms of technology, online methodologies. None of these things are a quick fix or a silver bullet to solving the way that these things work. With all of this, it's very clear that there needs to be a clear rationale for why we're doing it. It needs to clearly integrate with your learning aims. It needs to be delivered in the right way. And of course, it needs to be integrated seamlessly. Otherwise, it will be very obvious that it's something which we have telegraphed in rather than it being a core part of the learning. So just to talk now, finally, a little bit more about simulations and simulation-based learning. Now, again, I know some of you here may be very aware of this. Some of you may have heard me talk at the ICE events before. Whether the simulations are something you're already using or whether they're something you're not using, I still think there's lots of benefit here to talking through how this all works. And we'll talk for about another 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'll open up for any questions. So obviously, if you do have any questions about any of the things that I've mentioned, do put those in the chat or the Q&A part of the session. It'd be great to hear from any of you in terms of any thoughts. And as I said, and I think I've mentioned this as part of this session and any previous sessions that I've delivered, it's always dangerous putting yourself forward as an expert of something. And obviously, we are experts within what we deliver in terms of simulations, and then sort of branching out into other online learning methodologies is something which we have a great deal of expertise in. So always here to help with these things. So that's not just today, any other days. Obviously, I'll share my contact details with all of you. if there's ever anything we can do to help in terms of assistance with online learning, it's always something we're happy to do. Now, I've mentioned a lot about online and delivery and face-to-face and synchronous delivery. So there's not too much more for me to say on that, other than to say that I think the clear thing here is around how we plan and how we move forwards in terms of the things that we do. So it's always important to plan, obviously, and even more so with online learning. I'm delivering a lot of online learning myself at the moment, so please don't think that I'm sat here saying all these wonderful things about online learning. Once we finish with this session today, in about 2 hours, I'm going to be delivering 8.5 hours on Zoom today, delivering an online training session. So it's something which we're living and breathing here every day as well. Just to talk a little bit more about why we would be suggesting the use of simulations. And again, this move to online is causing a number of things. It's that work that students do both individually and as teams. So we really want to try and encourage students to continue to have that collaborative learning. I talked about COIL earlier, but obviously that involves that work across borders. There's obviously a lot of different things involved with that. Moving to utilize something like a simulation, and this can be focused on a whole range of things. And I think the key thing we would say with any of this as well is that the curriculum must guide everything that you're doing with this. So none of these programs should be brought in to say, well, this is the program and this is, then we're going to build our learning around it. These things should all fit around the learning and the curriculum that you have. But teamwork and collaboration is certainly something which we don't want to lose by moving online. And naturally, by moving online and to more hybrid-based models, we are isolating students, and that's just by the nature of going online. So where we can have group-based projects that can bridge that, that's going to be, in our view, essential. So simulations are a really good way of doing that. Next is to have critical thinking and decision-making as real key parts of what students are doing. And, it's not saying that students wouldn't be doing that all the time, because obviously normal assignments, normal things that students are doing will all do these things as well, but to a very different level. So actually getting students doing something and involved with something. And actually one of the things of feedback we hear a lot from students, either using our simulation programs or using other systems, is that they actually learn without realizing it. And it provides a real point of difference as well. And, this isn't to be about scaremongering as well, but having things which are interactive is going to be really key, because students are obviously, with the move to more online, it's going to open up students to attend different institutions. So more than ever, it's going to be a competitive landscape in terms of attracting students to come to all of our institutions across the world. There's always risk reward with things like this. So as I mentioned, everything has to be planned. Everything has to be dealt with in the right way. I mentioned how important it is to ensure that we develop this in light of the curriculum. That is number one. If we're not doing this in the right way, and we're not integrating things seamlessly into our curriculum, then we're not going to achieve what it is that we set out to do. So that's certainly the key things that we need to be thinking about. Obviously, we need to think about how we actually make this happen. So nothing happens overnight, but actually it is very easy to bring these things in. As again mentioned, this is in relation to what we deliver and the whole range of other things as well. And, if there are things which are useful and they're not things that we can help with, then we'll always point you in the right direction to get you some help around this. So in terms of getting up to speed, there's a huge amount of resources available. The majority of resources available. Obviously, it's important to have training for anyone who's going to deliver this, and students need to be brought in and onboarded very, very quickly. Now, I know a lot of you will be attending the session with Steve Hood on Friday. So another thing to say is that the simulations that we're offering here link in seamlessly with things like the CHEER certification and all those other certifications that are delivered both by STR and by other people across the industry. What I've just thrown up on the screen for you here is a little bit of an overview as to our LMS system. So this is something we introduced right at the start of COVID, and something we had planned to launch actually around now. So in our roadmap, we plan to launch this, around this time of year, in the autumn of this year. And then we brought that forward and launched this in April of this year. So that was brought forwards in a big way because of COVID. So again, there are big benefits as well to being online, because we can develop these things a lot quicker. So it's really important to not only teach our students about how they're going to utilize these programs, but of course we need to have train the trainer sessions for you or anyone else who's going to be teaching with the program. So in terms of the actual programs, and I don't want to, again, as I mentioned, I really hope this is not coming across like a sales pitch, because that is definitely not the aim. The key thing here, we have a whole range of programs which you can utilize across your curriculum, ranging from HOTS, which is a hotel simulation program, RevSim, which is focused on hotel management, but focused more specifically on forecasting and revenue management. Asset Sim, which is focused, as the name would suggest, on asset management and how we look at hotel management from an asset perspective. Food and Beverage Sim, which is focused on how we manage food and beverage, which obviously is really important. And I do want to mention a partner program of ours here. Now, I know a lot of you teach culinary arts, and this is a program I'd love to throw up on the screen and show you a bit more of, but it's just such a deep and wide program that there's nothing really I can show you that does it justice. So we work very closely with a partner called KP Education, and they have I think it's more than 100, probably more than 200 modules focused around culinary arts and food and beverage teaching and learning. So anyone who's teaching culinary arts, that is going to be one of the things that is really, really difficult to teach. And I don't want to sound doom and gloom, because I'm a very positive person. But of course, if we can't be together in a kitchen and we can't have a chef showing us knife skills and how we make a sauce and how we do all these things, then of course it's really difficult. And I know obviously a lot of schools are developing online resources in order to bridge that gap. But there's already a great system out there that can really help with that. And that's not to take away what the teachers would be doing. What that will do is it will help the students to be able to learn more, and then it will help the teachers to be able to then come in and say, actually, now I can actually teach you more on top of this. So that will definitely be a real benefit there in terms of that. So that's a real positive program, and I'd be delighted to tell you more about that. So if anyone wants to know more about these things, do let me know. That program is really easy to customize. So again, it's not something which is a cookie cutter style approach and you have to just cope with the way that it works. It's something which is really adaptable. You can build your own modules, you can change elements within it. There's a whole range of other things that go into that. Final thing to talk about before I close, and I can see we've had a couple of questions come in, so I'll stop talking in a moment and go through that. Something, and I've mentioned this on previous calls, I know if any of you have been part of previous webinars I've delivered with the ICE. One thing we launched relatively recently is something called a revenue management app. And this is something which allows students to step into the position of being a revenue manager. What we're focusing on a lot now is programs that look a little bit more like this. So more, subject specific learning based within a simulation. So again, if anyone wants access to this, please just let me know after the call. I'll happily set you up with demonstration access to this program. You can have a go. We'll happily jump on and tell you more about the program. But one of the other things I'd be interested to know about are what, and again, feel free to put this into the question and answer. This is obviously will be something very interesting for us. We're looking to develop a whole range of other programs like this. So we currently have this program. We've heard that things around menu engineering would be very interesting around this topic. And we're looking at things like event management and a whole range of other things. Now, these more subject specific simulations are areas which we're looking to develop more of, because they fit both alongside our existing simulations, and also they work very well as part of all the other learning and things that we're doing. So I'd be really interested to hear if there are any other areas where you feel there would be a real benefit to having a program such as that. So very happy to hear any thoughts or questions on that. And I do promise this is the final comment now. I mentioned earlier our Hospitality Business Acumen program. This is a condensed version of an industry certification program that we deliver with HSMAI, who are the Hospitality Sales and Marketing Association International. This is a great program for students to prepare them for industry. And again, not to be the voice of doom and gloom, but the global job market is going to be more and more competitive. So the more that students can do to prepare themselves for industry, the better. This is a program that does that. This helps bridge the gap between classroom-based learning. And again, please don't take this as me saying classroom-based learning is not doing everything it needs to prepare students. That's not what I'm saying. What this does is it takes industry-based learning and brings that into the classroom as well. So this, we're in an enviable position here working across both industry and education. And this program ensures that everything is streamlined across those two things, ensuring students understand both sides. And at the end of this, students go away with a certificate, which is going to tell them more that they need to know about how that all works. So I know that was a whistle-stop tour of online learning, internships, collaborative online learning, a look at simulation programs, a look at other programs that help us with learning. So thank you all for listening. It's all going well, I think, in terms of what I've heard across all the things that people are doing across the ICE and from the other sessions here. So I'll close the session, and I can see we've got 2 questions. So I'll just go and have a look at those. The first one we've got here is for the online internship software, how many hours learning is it? Are there learning outcomes, assessments? Can the language and tasks be customized? So that's obviously a really good question. So in terms of that, in terms of the number of hours of learning for the internship program, realistically that can be adapted. So there is no set number of hours for that. I mean, we would say in terms of the number of hours students will need to put into this, I mean, realistically, it's going to be a minimum of 6 to 10 hours, probably going up to, anywhere between 10 to 20 hours. And obviously it could go far more than that too. Again, as I mentioned, this is all about making sure this fits in with what you are doing. So again, obviously internships normally have set number of hours, and it may be that there's a minimum number of hours that need to be met in order for the internship to be valid. So again, bringing something like this in is a really good way of having a real good block of time, which will pull students through that. So I would say the key thing there is adaptable in terms of that time, but certainly as a minimum, you'd be looking at 6 to 10 hours, but could go up to a lot more than that, could be 20, 30 hours at least. In terms of learning outcomes and assessments, yes, we have elements prepared and built in for that. So there's a whole range of things we can do around that learning. And again, that will range around, sorry, I thought I was going to sneeze. That's always a good time when you're answering a question. Yes, we have those learning outcomes and assessments built in. Those are both presented and written. So there's a whole range of assessment methodologies built in there in terms of how that can work. The tasks can certainly be customized. So again, to relate around what it is that you want to cover. The easiest thing realistically is to get in touch. Drop me an email after the session. I'll put my email into the chat so you can see that. Once you tell me a little bit more about what you want this to look like, and I don't need too much detail, if you can tell me the core focus, how many students, how long, and then any other thoughts, then I can come back with some ideas and suggestions for how that can look. In terms of language, absolutely, that can all be customized. The majority of our programs are in English. We do have some of our simulations that are available in up to about 6 different languages. So, do let me know if there are any particular languages of interest. But the key thing really is the supporting material in terms of those languages. So all those support materials can all be adapted, because all those support materials, all of the stuff which we share within our LMS, there's always the ability to create that into any different language. The heart of all of our programs are all very much based around decision making, and I would say they're quite numerical, but that makes it sound like it's a numbers game, which it's not. But those elements are really easy to understand. It's the supporting material which is important in terms of the language. The second question I can see is it possible to receive a demo version of the mentioned simulations? Yes, absolutely. As I said, I'll go and do this and put this into, I think this can be sent out afterwards, because I don't know if everyone can see if I put this into the chat. Actually, if I do this, yeah, I can. I'll put this into the attendees. So I'll put my email into the chat. Oh, thanks, Jane. You saved me a job. So do send me an email, and obviously I think my information is up there on the ICE website. Absolutely, do email me, and I'll set you up with access straight away. We extended something that we were doing through COVID. At the early days of COVID, we used our foundation to do some reduced rates, and that's something which we continued, because obviously this is just something which we need to do to support everybody. I can see, and I can see another question that's come up around the research around online learning. I'll absolutely share that. Well, I'll be sharing this presentation, which includes that research at the start. So I'll definitely include that. So I'll send this over to Jane to share the presentation, and I'll also include a few of the other links for some of where that research came from in terms of that online learning as well. Okay, I think I've answered the two questions I can see in the Q&A, and I've answered the questions in the chat. So, so does anyone have anything else? Seems to be very efficient. So you've got 5 minutes left if anyone's got any questions.
Peter, if I could just jump in, it's Craig here. If you can hear me. Yeah. Hi. Good morning. We're both getting up early, so thanks for that. Really appreciate the input again today. Really useful. One thing we talked about yesterday is using online learning sort of not as a supplement to existing learning, but actually as part of the formal program, and making it credit bearing, so that actually sort of students recognize the formal benefit of it as well as the additional sort of learning benefit of it. Do you have any sort of idea about how your various simulations are used in terms of in different institutions? Are they credit bearing? Are they used for sort of credit bearing assessment in various institutions?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the vast majority of places where our programs are utilised, it is credit bearing. What we suggest is that the grading of utilising programs like this is not done based on the results of working within these sorts of programs. So when you work within a simulation based environment, invariably some teams can do very well, some teams can do not so well, and it's not always a case of a team not doing well not having understood what they're doing. So what we always recommend in terms of the actual true credit bearing items is that is done based more on the reflection of learning, and based more around those other elements that link in with that. So just to give an example, normally what we would suggest is, if I take one of our sort of core programs in terms of utilising a hotel simulation, normally at the start of that, we would recommend that students complete a business plan at the start of the process once they've taken on board the information. That business plan can either be written or it can be presented. That is something then which can be graded and assessed. The second part would be something around a decision log or a decision collection place, where we don't necessarily just detail the decisions we're making, but it's more of a journal as to what we're doing and why we're doing it. And that's really important, because that's where the understanding comes in, because that's the next part. And then the final part would be would be the summary at the end, would be again the sort of end of system report, and again that can be written or it can be presented, and those three elements would be the core areas we would by standard normally suggest that people would use. We do have some institutions who do include the grading based on the results within the simulation, but we do tend to recommend that that's a smaller part. So if that forms, say, 20 to 25% of the grade, and then 75 to 80% of the grade is made up based on those other elements, that's normally what we would recommend. But yeah, absolutely, this is definitely heavily embedded as in terms of grading. Yeah.
Okay, that's great, Peter. Thanks for that. Because what I might do is come back to you following this session just to develop that a bit further, because it might be useful for the benefit of our members just to give them just maybe examples, templates of how some institutions use it. So within which module, how they use it alongside, like you say, other assessment tools, and what credit that bears, just to kind of stimulate, oh yeah, we could do that and in a sense slot it into in this existing module.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I always understand sometimes it's hard to when you haven't used something like this, it can be hard to conceptualize how the kind of how you assess the details. So yeah, we can certainly do that. We'll produce a sort of pro forma, this is what an example course would look like in terms of learning aims. We also have lists of suggested textbooks and other reading that goes alongside with this, and then obviously we have the actual outlines of how that all works in terms of those assessments elements as well. So yeah, we're very happy to share that, and then we'll happily share that with the group. Yeah,
great. Thanks, Pete. Lovely.
Good stuff. I would ask if there's any other questions, but we seem to be bang on 8 o'clock, which is good.
Perfect timing.
Excellent. If anyone has any questions, send it through to myself or Peter, and this recording will also be available online afterwards. Thank you, Pete.
Perfect. Thank you all very much. I hope you all have a great day wherever you are in the world. Hopefully we'll all be back together and we'll get to meet face to face in the very near future. And obviously we've got lots more great ICE events to come this week, so looking forward to those.
Yep.
And for everyone that is heading into the Heli website workshop next, I'll be launching that in about 2 or 3 minutes. So we hope to see you there.
Fantastic. Thanks everyone. Peter. Bye for now. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.